All right, so let's actually go into Assign Focus next. I know some of you are brand new to Dreambox, so we'll talk just a little bit about what it is. But basically, it was created based upon teacher feedback, and it enables teachers to easily create focused assignments using real-time proficiency data about each learner in your classroom. So assignments can be used to complement your core curriculum or for targeted intervention. There are actually two different assignment types. So you can do short-term and now long-term assignments. So a student can have up to 2 assignments at any given time, being a combination of 1 short-term and 1 long-term, 2 short-term or 2 long-term assignments. The short-term assignments were designed to really complement your curriculum. So they're typically 2 lessons and students have 1 or 2 weeks to complete that lesson. You get to decide whether it's 1 or 2 weeks. For the long-term assignments, they're really for long-term targeted intervention. These assignments are anywhere from 2 to 10 weeks long. The student will have that concept assigned to them until they show proficiency in that topic that you choose, as well as until the time period is up. One or the other. They either gain proficiency and finish, or the time period is up. Okay? All right, and we're going to go into the dashboard and actually explore the ways that you can assign lessons through Assign Focus. And while we're doing that, Shannon had a great question in the chat. So the question is, after 5 months of weekly usage, about how many standards should be completed by the average student at the kindergarten level? So I'll get you the exact number from our curriculum team. But generally, I would say overall, for most grade levels, they usually have about somewhere between 1 and 3 standards met every month in Dreambox. So it should be somewhere about 5 standards, but I want to double check and make sure that I'm giving you the right answer. So I'm going to make sure I send that out via email afterward. Okay? Because I want to double check and make sure that my pacing is right for that one. Great question. All right, so this is what we see when we log into the dashboard. So we're going to go into the K2 class, and we're going to bring up first the standards button, the standards tab. Now there are actually 3 different ways that you can assign lessons. I'm going to show you each one of them. We'll talk about kind of why you would use each one. So first, there's a grid view that you can use. Second is going to be a grouping view, and then last, there is an Assign Focus tab that you can use to assign lessons. So the first one is through the grid view. I'm actually going to back this up to kindergarten. We'll take a look at those kindergarten standards, and right now we're set to Common Core standards. But to get a look at some of those lesson groups that we were really talking about through the, when we're talking about pre-K, kindergarten, we're going to click on the Common Core Standards button, and we're going to change it to Dreambox Learning Units, which is another way to look at the standards and the content that students look at when they're working in Dreambox. So here are the Dreambox Learning Units just for kindergarten, and we can see for this class exactly where each student is for each one of these standards. So the green dot, remember, it means that the student is proficient. That means they've been through all the content with demonstrated understanding. The blue half moon means that the student is in progress or currently got some lessons working on that particular concept. And then may need attention lets us know that the student has been struggling on that area. So this is a little indicator to let you know that that's an area where the student has been struggling, and Dreambox is adapting for that to try to help that student. You can add an assignment from this place. So let's say that I'm working on building 1 to 10 optimally in my classroom, and I want to give my students a little extra practice on this. I can click the assignment button here, and it will take me into Assign Focus. Okay, that is one way that we can go into the Assign Focus feature from that data review. Now, I like doing it from starting out with the grid view because it does allow me to first see just the standards that my students have been working on and where they are. okay? From here, I go to the grouping view. And you're right, Jamie, we did not separate the pre-K standards from kindergarten. We wrapped them all up into kindergarten because we realized that that's something that they're all going to need to know for kindergarten. And I totally understand your frustration. I'm going to talk to our development team about that too, if there's some way that we can better surface that for you all to make it a little bit easier and, and help get those students exactly what they need. All right, so from here, the other thing that I can do is use the drop down to go to the grouping view, okay? At the grouping view, I can select a domain or select a topic that I want to work on. So this is a Dreambox learning unit, so it's a category. So I've got counting, for example. And then I can pick a lesson group, or if I was in Common Core State Standards, I would pick the domain, and then I would pick the standard. So here I can see where the kids are using Dreambox right now, and there's an Add Assignment button. And that takes us to the assignment feature as well. So that's the second way that they can get into Assign Focus. The last way that students can get into Assign Focus is through the Assignment tab here, the Assign Focus tab, okay? That Assign Focus tab has an Add Assignment button right there. So the Add Assignment button allows us to get into that same screen that we saw just before, and now we can see the two assignment types. So here we can see short-term or long-term. There are a couple reasons why you'd want to do each one. So short-term is really to connect what your students are doing in Dreambox to the content that they're doing in the classroom. It can be a way to introduce the topic, to reinforce it, to kind of do a check-in and see where they are with it, as well as give them additional review, especially sometimes you want to do that before an assessment too. Then we also have the long-term, so that's the short-term option. The short-term option we'll just go over first is it can be a 1 week or 2 week assignment, and we can select the grade level. I'm going to switch, we're going to stay here. Let's go to kindergarten. And the category we're going to go into is comparisons and ordering. And then we'll go into identifying more or less than equal, just as an example. Okay, so here I can decide the 1 or 2 week assignment. They're going to get 1 or 2 lessons depending on the level we see them working at. So here, the kids in the Standard Not Started category we would give them 2 just started lessons to help them introduce the topic. If I had kids in the Standard in Progress category, then they would get 2 lessons that are right in line with what Dreambox is going to give them anyway, and those are the in progress lessons that I see here. The Proficient in Standard students are the students that would get a review lesson. Now, if they do great on that review lesson, it's the only one that they get. If they struggle though, then we'll actually give them a lesson that's a step backward and provide them with extra support. Now, one way that you can access some of those lessons we were talking about earlier is through these buttons here. And I would go for those just started lessons. So I'm just going to click on it just to show an example. And so you're going to hear a little bit of audio. You'll hear Stella, our narrator, talking. And you can bring this up on a whiteboard. You can use a digital projector, play this on a computer station with your students, and have them play with you. So this is one of those ones where we flash it. So this is one way that you can get into the lesson, and you can play it with your students if you want to use this as an instructional tool in your classroom. I'm just going to close out of this. And you can do that with any of these 3 buttons, the Just Started, the In Progress, or the Review lesson. Now, you get to pick the kids, they get the assignment. Dreambox determines the level of lesson they get depending on which category they are in, okay? So here I pick the kids, and then I would click the Add Assignment button, and that would give them that short-term assignment. they would have either 1 or 2 weeks to complete the lesson, and then it would disappear from their activities with the lessons that they could choose in their feed. Now, if I wanted to do a longer term assignment, I have a choice. I can do anywhere from 2 to 10 weeks here. And then I get to select the grade level, the domain, and then the standard, or here I'm in lesson groups. And then I can see at the bottom, once again, the students, and I select those students. Now for this one, I probably don't want to select the proficient and standard students because this is a long-term assignment to get with the intention of getting those students from wherever they are when I give the assignment to 100% proficiency for this topic or for this standard. Okay, so that means that these proficient and standard kids will only get one lesson. So we're going to probably give it to the standard not started or standard in progress kids so that we see we give them multiple lessons to get toward that 100% proficiency. Great question, Jamie. So the history of their work on the assigned lesson does remain after their assignment is up. So if you assign for a week, okay, now I see the second part of your question. So you do get, as a teacher, you get the assignment history where you get to see what they did. If you want them to, you give a 1 week assignment and they don't finish after that week ends, then you can actually go back and reassign it, but it will let you know, hey, they didn't complete that assignment, and you can go back and do that again. So that's why we really want to encourage the students to get into the assigned lessons. So I'll show you what those assigned lessons look like. Because I do understand, you're right. If they don't click into it, they don't complete it, and that 1 week is up, poof, it disappears. So if you make an assignment, then we want to direct them to go into these lessons. So this lesson is an assigned lesson, so it's going to have a little notebook icon. Now the lessons that are short-term lessons, so that last either 1 or 2 weeks, are going to have a star on it. So we want to make sure that those stars, they go into those first. If it's a longer term assignment, then it's actually going to have a different icon on it. Let me show you what that looks like. I think it's also in the dashboard here. So the longer term assignment, oh, actually it doesn't. Let me find that for you all. There's a little visual. The longer term assignment actually has a different icon on it. So it's going to have a blue icon still, but instead of having the star on it, it's actually going to have this calendar on it instead. So that kind of notes the difference between long-term and short-term. So for a short-term assignment, star, long-term, it's the calendar. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is the data. Oh, you know what? Actually, there's one more thing I wanted to show you, and I'm going to send this out as well. So this document will show you what you can assign. Get it up on the screen here. So this is going to show us with all of the grade levels what you can assign using Assign Focus. So I'm going to scroll down and go down to, let's go to grade 2. We haven't talked about that grade today. So here we can see the Common Core State standards that are covered in Dreambox for grade 2. And then we can also look at the Dreambox learning units. And with this, the Dreambox learning units, it's going to describe the types of things that students are doing. So that can be really helpful. The Dreambox learning units do tend to be kind of a bigger group of lessons than just the Common Core standards, because they do tend to cover a little bit more ground. So that's, if you want to give a long-term assignment, you might want to think about using those Dreambox learning units so students are actually working on more content. So I'm going to make sure that we send this document out as well so you all can use it for Assign Focus. All right, so once an assignment has been completed by your students, I'm going to discard these changes real quick and go back into Assign Focus. You go to the Assign Focus tab, and this is where you can see the assignments that you've made. So here, I can choose whether I want to look at the short-term assignments or the long-term assignments. So let's start with short-term. So short-term are those 1 or 2 week assignments that just disappear after a student's time period is up. So here we see that the students we're working on building up to 20 optimally. And this is an assignment that the students haven't worked on yet. We just made this assignment. So we can see that the status for this particular one is not started. We're going to scroll down to another one. So this one's building columns on a hundreds chart. So for this short-term assignment, I can see every student that was given the assignment. And remember, it doesn't have to be the whole class. It can just be 1 or 2 kids or a group of kids. So here we can see whether or not the assignment was completed, the time they spent on it, and the level of lesson or lesson type they got. Now that key for the lesson type is going to be over here on the right-hand side. So is it a just started lesson? Is it a progressing lesson? Or is it a review lesson? So that's going to kind of cue you into where their starting point was for these lessons. Then when it says lessons here, I can see whether or not the lesson was completed. And there's a little key here for lesson completion. So did they demonstrate understanding? Maybe the green check marks, we're going to use that again. And we saw on the lesson cards. If they didn't demonstrate understanding, then we use the gray check mark. And if they didn't complete the lesson, then we'll see that open circle. And that's letting me know I might want to assign this again, or maybe I want to pull that student and review with them because they didn't work on the assignment. So here I look at the lessons. Now for any kid who hasn't completed a lesson successfully, like for example, let me pull it up a little closer, Mamie here, when I click the More button, I can view that lesson and I can play through that lesson with the student. So that can be really helpful if I had multiple students who were at the progressing level and they didn't get through a lesson with demonstrated understanding, then I can click that View Lesson button and we can play this as a group, or another great way to do this is to play this as a whole class. Hey guys, I gave you an assignment. Let's go over it, just like you would some other assignments that you do in other places. You can go over those assignments in Dreambox and have the kids work through it and show off the great learning that they do, or even teach each other a little bit. It's a great way to bring this lesson into your classroom instruction. So that is all for the short-term assignment. And if you have questions, make sure you're entering those in the chat. The next thing we're going to look at is the long-term assignment. Remember, long-term assignments are anywhere from 2 to 10 weeks long, and they'll see a calendar icon on the lessons for that long-term assignment. Now, for long-term assignments, they'll continue to get those assignments with the calendar icon on them until the time period is up. So they can play lots of lessons and make lots of growth. So this is actually a pretty high-level lesson in this example, but here we see a lesson that was assigned, and we can see the status tells us whether or not the students on this list have completed all of the content for this assignment for the standard or for the lesson group if it's a Dreambox learning unit or not. So if it says goal not reached, that means they didn't reach 100% proficiency. If it says goal reached, they completed all of that content, okay? So I also see the total time that they spent, and that's not just on one lesson, that's on all of the lessons that they worked on. The lesson type, once again, same thing, so just started, progressing, or review. And then the lessons, this is a number of lessons that they completed. So for some of our students, it's quite a few. And we'll notice that this varies for students. So we had one student who was progressing who got had to do 9 lessons, and another student who had to do 7. And that's because what we realized is some of the students were starting in different places, slightly different places. So some of them were maybe a little further on. Maybe some of them, when they got rolling on some of these lessons, they really showed us that they understood. And so we didn't have to take them through as many lessons to demonstrate understanding as others. So we're going to click on this View button here. And that's going to show us a chart that demonstrates what students did. So here, this student started on right here on this chart. So at 18% of the way through the Dreambox content. So already before we made this long-term assignment. We want them by the end of these 4 weeks to gain 100% proficiency. So week 1, they spent 20 minutes and they did 4 lessons. Week 2, they did 5 minutes on 1 lesson. Week 3, and they had already reached their goal, and so we're not going to see any data for week 3 and week 4 because they reached it in week 2. And so Dreambox decided, okay, they've reached proficiency. We're going to stop assigning the lessons. And we'll keep assigning them either until the student has reached proficiency or until that time period for the assignments are up. When I scroll below this chart, I can see the weeks that they worked and the lessons that they worked on. So here are the 4 lessons that they worked on in week 1. I can see that they demonstrated understanding on all of them, and I can play each one of those lessons. In week 2, here's the lesson that they worked on, and I can play the lesson again. So this is printable. Good questions from Jeff. So looking at this chart, that shaded area is just helping us highlight that this is the aim line that we want students to go for. So we anticipate that they'll follow about this trajectory if we want them to get to the 100% proficiency. This blue line above it for this student is the actual trend line of what the student actually accomplished, which won't always follow exactly with that blue shaded area. As you can see here, sometimes it'll be above, sometimes for a struggling student, it might be below. And by the way, if you have a student who has been given an assignment and we see after they've worked through 3 lessons or they reach a point where they've failed 3 lessons or they've had trouble on 3 consecutive lessons, then we will stop that long-term assignment because we do want to make sure that the student is not continually working on something that's frustrating. We'll put an alert in this long-term assignment. So we'll let you know that the assignment was stopped because the student did not demonstrate understanding. So that's really important too, because we don't want to give those kids something that's going to continue to be frustrating for them, but we also want to let you know that that's happened too. This is printable, so if you're using this as an intervention and you need to have this in that maybe if you keep a data notebook on your students, you can print this out to document this as an intervention that you use for your students. So that is assigned focus. If you need a refresher on what assigned focus is, how it works, there's a video in the assigned focus tab on the right-hand side. So I want to just pause. I know we've had a lot of content and a lot of talking, and see if you all have any questions before we go on to a discussion question real quick here. So we're going to go ahead. If you're typing, just keep going. I promise we'll answer your question. So discussion question here. I want to see if, just as you're thinking about this new feature in Dreambox, using both long and short-term assignments, how could you use assigned focus with your students? So, great question, Jamie. So if there is a student who's very close to meeting a standard, you could give them an assignment and it would boost them up to meeting that standard. Absolutely. All right, everyone. So a few thoughts on this question. So if you want to use assigned focus with your students, love it. Thanks, Shannon. So you can assign the lesson to see if classwork progress is matching Dreambox progress. Great. Yep. A little check-in is always nice. If you're typing your answer, don't worry. I'm going to give you a little cheat sheet here. Couple other things that we thought about at Dreambox, but I love your ideas too. For the short-term assignments, it can be to assess a student's content knowledge prior to teaching a standard, to introduce that content before you teach it, and provide a little background knowledge, spot check while you're teaching, and then review content at the end of a unit. That also can be valuable. Long-term assignments really are meant to be that specific targeted intervention, and it also can help you chart growth over time within a specific standard. So if you know something is really challenging for your students, sometimes teachers use this for charting growth over a time with a specific standard. We actually did this with a test group of educators, and that was one of the things that they did was they, especially some of those second and third grade teachers were assigning certain standards that they found particularly challenging at their grade levels, and gave the students some opportunities to get some targeted help with Dreambox.